Hello, I'm Ruken from Sultans of Turkey's PR department.
Hi, I'm Buse. I'm also from Sultans of Turkey's PR department.
Hi everyone, my name is Mel and I'm a mentor with Team 3132, the Thunder Down Under from Sydney, Australia.
Today, as our virtual camp continues, we are with fellow team from Sydney, Thunder Down Under, and they will be talking about topics like Chairman's Award missions and projects. So we're all ears.
Thanks very much. I'll just get my screen share started and then we'll get going.
Yep, we can see your screen.
Fantastic, thanks very much. All right, so hi everyone. Like I said, my name's Mel and I'm a mentor with Team 3132, the Thunder Down Under from Sydney, Australia. And today I'm going to talk about how you can put your team's mission into practice and our perspective on what makes an outreach program really successful, and also at the end, some tips for leveling up your chairman's presentation and submission. So first of all, just a little bit about my team, Thunder Down Under. So we are going into our 13th season this year. We were founded back in 2009 by Professor Michael Heimlich, who was an electrical and electronics engineering professor at Macquarie University, which is where our team is based. So we're located in Sydney, which is Australia's largest city, and we're hosted by and we work out of Macquarie University. Because we're hosted by the university, we're a community team rather than a school team, and we take students from all across the Greater Sydney area, and we have mentors coming from industry as well as university students, again, all across Sydney. And our team is very proud to be 50% female. We are also the oldest FRC team in Australia. When we were founded back in 2009, we were the only one. And we are very, very lucky to live right next door to the headquarters of First Australia, which means that we've been able to partner with them on some really interesting projects over the years, including starting the first off-season event, the Jewel Down Under, and the first official FRC competitions here in Australia, introducing the FTC program and growing the FLL program from 40 to over 400 teams. A little bit about me before I go on. I'm a founding member of Team 3132. So some of these stories that I'm telling are from my own sort of personal experience. So if I ramble on a bit, just forgive me. I know a lot about these things and they're all very fond memories for me. I'm a mechanical, electrical and outreach mentor. I've mentored since 2013 and I'm also an alumni. Outside of FRC, I'm the National Judge Advisor for FLL and FTC. Ask me about FLL. I love talking about FLL. And in my day job, I'm a maths and engineering teacher in a high school here in Sydney. If you've not really heard about Team 3132 before, some of our big accomplishments that we're really proud of, we've won a few different awards over the years. We're really proud that 3 of our mentors are Woody Flowers finalists. That's Sarah, Mike and Luann Heimlich, who've won Woody Flowers Finalists Awards over the past 7 or 8 years, and we're very proud of them and everything that they've done. We've won a couple of regionals and a couple of championship divisions, a few Chairman's Awards along the way, and we're also really proud of our 7 Dean's List finalists. We have some really amazing students on our team who've done some incredible things, and we're really proud of them winning those awards, and a lot of them have gone on to do really interesting things like working with Google and ResMed and in medical technology as well. And we entered the Hall of Fame in 2017 when we won the Championship Chairman's Award in Houston that year. So our team's motto is innovate, improve and inspire the world. And our mission statement is STEM for everyone, everywhere. And that's what drives a lot of our outreach program. And it's what underlies the programs that we've chosen to do over the years and what we're moving towards doing in the future. So what I want to present on today is the idea that an FRC team is more than robots. So if you've presented for the Chairman's Award, you'll know that the other half of FRC, and sometimes it's a bit more than a half, it can feel like it takes over your life sometimes, is the outreach programs that we do. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we think make a really impactful and sustainable outreach program for teams. I will just preface this by saying that outreach is different for everyone. This is the perspective of a team that was the first team in our country that's an international team, and that's not necessarily, our experiences aren't necessarily the same as the experiences that teams in other countries will have. So these are just a couple of things that we think can be really helpful in improving and making your outreach program more sustainable as you go forwards. So I want to talk about 3 different things that I think can help improve outreach programs. And once I've gone through those, I'll go on and I'll talk a little bit about some of the projects and programs that we've developed over the past 13 years. So the first thing that I think is really important for an outreach program is for your team all together to make sure that you're setting the goals and that those goals are based on your team identity. When I say goals, I'm not talking about really specific things like, you know, in 3 years' time, we want to have started 30 FLL teams in our area. I'm talking about setting goals in terms of the type of outreach that you want to be doing and the type of impact that you want to be having. And because it's more of a broader goal, we think it's really important that it connects to your team's identity. So some things to think about as you're setting these goals. Think about your team's history. How were you started? And is there some way that you want to give back to the people or the organizations that helped get you going? Think about the demographics of your team. If you have a diverse team, do you have team members whose communities you want to work with? Or do you have a way into a particular community via someone on your team? Alternatively, do you want to change the demographics of your team or the demographics of STEM in your area in some way to bring in more girls, more people of colour, something like that? If you have a mission statement, is that going to impact what your outreach looks like? For us, because our mission statement was STEM for everyone, everywhere, what we always really focused on was taking STEM opportunities into places where it didn't previously exist, and also bringing it to people that didn't ordinarily have access. So a lot of the programs that I'll talk about later were directed at that, about improving access and bringing STEM to more and more people in more and more places. So do you have a mission statement or a motto for your team that can help inform these goals? And then are there specific causes that matter to your team? So do students or mentors on your team have particular personal stories or personal experiences that lend themselves towards particular causes? So that could be working with students with disabilities. Something that we worked on for a couple of years was with an organisation that was promoting improved water safety. So in Australia, lots of the cities are around the coast, and so water safety and surf safety is something really important. And we had a student on our team who had saved her sister from drowning as a child, and so we worked with an organisation that was all about water safety. So is there a similar story on your team that you could be leveraging there? If you're just starting out on your outreach journey, my best advice is really to start small. You look around at teams and you see they're doing what seems like a million different programs, but if you're just getting started, the best thing to do is pick a few specific measurable programs and focus your efforts on those. You want to build up a couple of really strong programs, and you want to make sure they're sustainable as well so they can keep going over the years. It's better, in our opinion, to have a few strong and sustainable programs than a lot of programs that haven't really settled down and you don't know if they're going to last the distance. And one more thing is just to not forget about yourselves when you're setting these goals. A lot of our outreach goals tend to be outwards because it's outreach and looking at how we can help other people. But don't forget to set goals for your team as well, whether that's upskilling students on your teams, making your own team more financially sustainable, changing the demographics. Don't overlook your team, because your outreach success depends on your team's success as well. You need everyone involved and everyone buying into your outreach program. Now, this is something that might be a bit of an Australian thing, and maybe it's something that's a bit more about a team that's the sort of first or in their country or the first in your particular region. but we think it's important to start local. Rather than going for a big international outreach program first, look at your local community and see if there's something that you can be doing with the people that you live with. So some things to think about here. Is there an existing local FLL or FTC program, whether that's a real built-up program with lots of events and networks, or it's just a couple of teams here and there? Is there some way that you can get involved with that? That might be by providing mentors to teams that are struggling to move forward in terms of their technical expertise. It might be lending some money so a new team can get started. It might be opening up your build space for an FLL team to meet in. And if there are no teams in your area, would it be viable for you to start one? And that can take different forms. It can be just providing funding for a group of interested students to get going, or it can be starting a team within your team, younger siblings of members on an FLL team, or also participating in FTC. Can you get that program going in your area? And I think this is really important for a couple of different reasons. Number one is that if your outreach is directed at the Chairman's Award, obviously supporting the first progression of programs is really important. And one of the things a lot of teams talk about is their involvement with FLL and FTC. But also think about it from a team's sustainability perspective and your team's sustainability, because often a really good way of getting future members onto your FRC team is drawing on the first progression of programs. So if there's a really strong network of FLL and FTC teams in your area, then you're going to have a lot of students interested in joining your program, increasing the size of the team, providing more resources for your program to continue into the future. So it's not just about supporting the community, but that community coming back and supporting you later on. Could you become, or are you already, a type of hub team for FRC teams in your area? I'm not sure that this is a term that everyone's familiar with. I think there's a few of these in the United States, hub teams. What this basically means is that you serve as the go-to team in your area. And that can be in terms of expertise, just being someone that other teams can ring up and ask questions when they're struggling with a particular technical problem. It can sometimes mean opening up your facility for teams to come in and use tools they don't ordinarily have access to. It can be loaning teams items that they can't get very quickly. There's a team here in Australia that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and they're not us, it's their team. The team is called Project Bucephalus 5985, and they're located about 90 minutes south of us. And they really are a hub team for the 6 or 7 teams in their area. And I know 6 or 7 doesn't sound like a lot, but Australia's never had more than 60 FRC teams. So they're a hub for about 10% of the teams in Australia. And what that means is they drive up to the kickoff event with representatives from other teams and make sure that they can get access to their kit on kickoff day. It means opening their facilities up for other teams to work out of. It means hosting scrimmage and week 0 events because they have the space for a full field down there. So if you're in a position where you have access to resources that other teams don't have, can you strengthen the teams in your area by serving as a hub team? By being a hub team, you can upskill teams, you can give them access to things they don't otherwise have. And again, those teams can then help support you as you move forward with different initiatives. Outside of the first progression of programs, look at other STEM initiatives that you might be able to run. So library programs have been really popular, taking EB3 Lego kits into libraries and running workshops with students. Can you do outreach in your schools as well? And again, the reason for doing this is twofold. It's bringing STEM opportunities to people that wouldn't otherwise have it, but it's also developing a community of people that can come back and support you and join your team later on. Now, I said obviously library programs are really popular, and I do just want to say there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration for programs from programs that other teams have developed, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel with all of your outreach programs. You can be inspired and you can do things that other people are doing. It's about the commitment, making the impact on people. It doesn't have to be a new thing every single time. I'd also encourage you to look at your community really closely and see if you can identify some underprivileged groups in your community that wouldn't ordinarily have access to STEM and programs like FIRST. And are you in a position to be able to support an FLL team, an FRC team, or even just coming in and doing a holiday camp with you, something like that, to support students who might be at-risk youth. So we have a team that we're associated with here in Sydney of at-risk youth that attend a different type of school because they may have dropped out of high school and they're coming back later on. We've been involved in starting teams in Indigenous communities up in Northern Australia, and we have a big program called Robots in the Outback that I'll talk about a little bit later on that starts FRC teams in Outback Australia, so in towns like Ivanhoe that have a very small population, only a couple of hundred people, that can potentially be located, 6, 7, 10 hours from the nearest large city. And that really those students don't have much access to STEM programs, and the Robots in the Outback program goes out to them and gives them access. So are there people in your community that you could be supporting? I should probably add on at this point, I think local community means different things to different people. Local community for some American teams really is just the couple of suburbs around them because there are so many FRC teams. But if you're outside the continental US, like we are, and like I know a lot of you guys are, your local community might be your state, it might be your country. So local means different things to different people. But what can you do to strengthen your local community and build up a network of STEM people that you can be a part of and that you can support and you can help people have access to? Now, in terms of other reasons why we think it's important to start local, we think that you can actually make better use often of your resources if you're doing local outreach. So if you've got funding that you can spend helping people, if you spend it locally, you're not spending it on shipping, you're not spending it on travel. You don't have to travel to locations far away and use your time in that way. You're on the ground right there, able to help people immediately. So if you have limited resources and you know it's going to be, a particular program might use up a lot of those resources, we think that you'll be able to use those more effectively in your local area. So particularly when you're starting out, think, what can I do with the people around me before you start looking outwards? And again, I've said this a few times, if you build a strong community now, then later on, they are the people that will help grow your outreach program as you start to look further outside. Okay, and then the last big thing that I want to talk about in terms of really being able to put your mission into practice and being able to implement really strong programs is the idea of building strong relationships with other teams, with other organizations, with other people, because really successful outreach programs don't come from just one team working alone. They come from really strong partnerships. So if you've got a strong program, but you're finding that you're running out of resources or time, then here are some things that you should think about to bring other people on board. I would encourage you to look at building relationships with FRC teams that you share common experiences with. So that can be people maybe that you played on an alliance with at a previous event that would remember you. Send them an email, get in touch, find out what they're doing. Can you get involved in a program they're running? Do they want to get on board with something you're doing? And they don't have to be local. These can be overseas people. Another way of doing this is to look for teams in different areas that might share a common sponsor. So we actually talked earlier today to a Mexican team that contacted us just because we happened to both be sponsored by Rockwell Automation. And we had a really interesting conversation with them about all of the outreach programs that they're doing in their city in Mexico. And that only came about because they were just looking for people who were sponsored by Rockwell Automation. So look for common experiences because it gives you a place to start. And also common goals. So if you're interested in doing outreach in a particular location or a particular type of outreach, are there other teams working towards that same goal? Can you get in touch and see if you can collaborate on something? It's also a really good idea to get to know the local people who are the program directors, the head referees, the judge advisors for different FIRST programs in your area. So whether that's First Lego League, FTC, or FRC, a really good way of doing this is always going to be by volunteering at events. So sending students and mentors along to events to help them run them and to get to know the people involved. Because these are the people who can potentially support you later on. If you want to get an FLL program running in your district, it would really help to know the program director from the neighbouring district. Another way, and this is a little bit more effort, but to really get into the good books of the program directors, is if there's a shortage of hosts for events, is your school or your venue, your workshop, a location where you could actually be hosting an event? You could offer to do that. So getting really involved in the full progression of programs is really, really, really useful. And then the last one is to think about different ways that you can be leveraging your sponsors. What type of relationship do you have with your sponsors right now? Is it that they give you a certain amount of money for your season, and then you recognize them by putting them on your signage and on your website and going to visit them and showing them your robot? Or are you doing something else that makes your team a really interesting sort of prospective partner for new sponsors? So could you think about using sponsorship money rather than for your own team, but redirecting it immediately to support other people? So over the years, we've partnered with a number of different organizations and companies that give us funding to run our programs. And that includes things like the Robots in the Outback program. Now, the money never comes to us. We never get any part of it. We're able to redirect it immediately into doing one of our outreach programs. And that can be something that's quite interesting to sponsor companies. Also think about giving back to those companies in different ways. So could you be running robotics holiday camps for children of employees, for example, because that can be something that's really interesting and lets you build a different type of relationship and maybe get to know some of the employees at that company a little bit better. And again, I will just say that you don't have to have every initiative being something completely brand new to everyone. And in fact, not every initiative needs to start with you. If you share a common goal with an FRC team that's already running a project, remember that you can still have an incredibly powerful impact by supporting that existing program. So don't be afraid of working with other teams on something they've already started, because eventually you'll want help from other people and other teams as well to move your programs forward. So those are the three things that we think can be really, really helpful to think about as you're building up your outreach program over the years. And it's certainly the sort of things that we depended on as we built our outreach program. Okay, I want to go on now and just take you through a couple of the different programs and initiatives that we've run over the years. Some of these are past programs that have been wrapped up now, and some of them are ongoing. Some of them have been sort of cut off by COVID as well, and we might get them running again in a few years. So they're just a few different things that we have done over the years to maybe think about as you go forward with your outreach. So the first one I want to talk about is the MICROBANK loan system. And this is something that we've had for about a decade now, and it was really important in the first couple of years. So we identified really early on, when we were the only team in Australia, that the main problem people were having with getting FRC teams started was you needed a sponsor to pay your registration. But the way that you get sponsors interested is by having a robot. But you can't have a robot until you've paid for your registration. And so it kind of circles round as this issue that you can't get past. You need the money to get the money. So what we did, and very early on to get the first few teams going in Australia, was partnered with the New South Wales state government to set up a microbank. And what this did was loan teams at no interest the money that they needed for their rookie registration fee. So they'd be able to register as a rookie team, they'd get their kit, they'd be able to build the robot and compete. And then the following year, they'd take that robot to potential sponsors and be able to get funded because they had something to show to those companies. And then over the years, as they brought more sponsors on board and developed programs of their own, they would pay that money back into the microbank, and we would be able to then send it out and use it for a different team. Along with that, we developed something called the Fishermen's Institute, which is a really similar idea. It's another no-interest loan for teams, but this one, rather than paying for registration, was money to buy EB3 kits, because the idea that we had was that, in order to pay back that microbank loan, those teams needed to have some kind of ongoing income. And a good way of doing that, at least in Australia, is by running holiday camps, robotics holiday camps. So we would loan them the money to buy the EB3 kits, and then over time, the money that they would earn from those camps would come back, and they'd be able to repay the loan for the kits and the microbank loan. And that Fishermen's Institute program was run in partnership with Google. And in that way, we were able to get a number of teams started that would have otherwise really struggled to get off the ground. But once they were going, they became really successful teams. So again, that was a case of thinking about some of the problems in our local community and finding ways to solve that. Okay, the Robots in the Outback program. This is one of, I think, my favorite programs, and one that's had I think, a really significant impact on a number of people. So in Australia, as you may know, most of the cities are around the outside of the country. And that means that in the outback, so in the centre, there's only a few much smaller towns with limited resources, smaller schools, and less industry. And we knew that as part of our mission statement, which was STEM for everyone, everywhere, what we wanted to do was to give access to students who were living in outback towns, so remote and regional towns in Australia. So in order to do that, we partnered with Google and Ford. So Google and Ford both funded registration fees for high schools and other organisations in these outback towns that were interested in starting FRC teams. They funded us bringing mentors over from the United States, from American teams, and then sending them out to these towns at the start of build season so that they would have, for a couple of days, experienced mentors teaching them how to get started as an FRC team. And later on, this transitioned to, again, providing us the funding to bring those teachers at those schools into Sydney, into our city, to take part in conferences and workshops so that they could continue to develop their expertise. And Ford also very kindly loaned us a number of vehicles to make that all possible. So that ran, well, this says 2017. This is just a picture I found from an old advertisement, but we ran this starting back in 2015, 16, 17, and we had a couple of teams in the years after that as well. And this was a really sort of impactful program because it really did take STEM into places where it was otherwise very hard to go to. And it's really wonderful now seeing a lot of those teams still going. They live in really strange or hard to get to locations. So it's really exciting to see them at kickoffs now. At the kickoff for this season, we had a mentor come in from a town called Weewa, and he'd been driving for 8 hours to get there for kickoff. He picked up his kit, he turned around and he drove 8 hours straight back home so that his team could have their kit on the first day. So it's a really cool program and something that we're really proud of. Going along with that is a number of international teams that we've started since 2012. So we've been able to start FRC teams in places like the Dominican Republic and Poland. The teams that we started in those locations, we actually sent our lead mentor to. In 2012, we didn't have our lead mentor for our build season because he traveled to the Dominican Republic to get that team started on their journey. We started some teams in China and one in Vietnam via international tours in those countries. And we also provided the funding for the first team in India. And that's a really cool story. That's 60-20-24 R factor. And it's a really cool story because they were originally an FLL team who came to an event that we host every year or every 2 years. Or Macquarie University hosts every year or 2 years, called the Asia Pacific Invitational, which is a World Championship level FLL event. And they came there as an FLL team and they won the Champions Award. And they came back 2 years later as an FTC team and won the Inspire Award. And while they were here, we got talking to them and saying, oh, you know, you've been around for a while. Are you interested in becoming an FRC team in the future? And they said, yeah, we'd love to, but we're not sure that we can find the money for the registration. And so through our sponsors and our MICROBANK program, we were able to loan them that money. and get them started. And they've gone on to become a really impactful team in India. They were a Championship Chairman's Award finalist last year at Detroit, which was really exciting. And so it's really cool to see how these teams have gone on and developed and become really impactful in their own regions. We also have a strong presence in China, and this goes back over a number of years through something called the Chiwa Foundation, which is a charitable foundation that funded a robotics innovation center in a rural area of China. And we've done a number of different things with that organization. One of the really big ones being sending a number of our students and mentors out there into the rural town where this center is located to run English-speaking robo-camps, and being able to provide two different things to the students there. Firstly, access to these STEM programs, but also the ability to improve their language skills by speaking to native English speakers. And so that's something that we've done over a long time, and we're really proud to have been part of. More recently, and this is one of our ongoing projects, we put together the Compass Alliance, which is a partnership of well-known teams from around the world. So that includes people like the Neutrons, 503 Frog Force, who won the World Championship Chairman's Award last year, 1678, who are from California, and then Rembrandts as well. And this group of teams has developed a number of different initiatives over the past couple of years. That's things like the 24/7 call center, where you can get on a Discord helpline with different experienced mentors and experienced students if you're having technical problems, or you want to talk about strategy, or you need some help with awards, and you can get one-on-one help from experienced mentors through the call center. Help hubs, which I think I've kind of explained, so teams that sign up to register as a hub team for their area. The Here For You program, which was an initiative that provides quiet spaces at events for students that can become overwhelmed or stressed in very busy events. Then a Here For You room is somewhere they can go and have some time out and then be able to go back out later on. And also the Pathways resources, which is a collection of resources uploaded to the website. So that's been something that we've worked on over the past 4 years. So those are our really big programs. I did also want to mention just a couple of other ones that are not as major, but I still think pretty interesting. So we have an initiative called the Lightning Service, which comes back to the Rito program. In 2016, we had a huge number of Rito teams. I think it was probably more than a dozen coming to our event in Sydney. And we realized in conversations with them that the thing they were finding the hardest, strangely, was they couldn't build their bumpers because they were in remote towns that didn't have pool noodles for sale, among other things, and didn't have easy access to fabric and stuff like that. So we made all of the bumpers for those teams and provided them to them at the regional. And over the years, that developed into full support for teams at events. So at the regionals here in Australia, up until 2019, which was the last one, official one that we had, we would take basically our whole workshop with us to the event. So all of our material, all of our off-the-shelf parts, and tools as well. And we set up an area in the regional where teams could come to if they needed to do some slightly more serious work on their robot, if they needed to borrow parts. And we also had experienced senior students who would go around different teams and check in with them and see if there was anything that they needed help with or needed to borrow. And that became the Lightning Service. We also have a program called Mentors Without Borders. And this again is something that came out of the Robots in the Outback program. This was a conference that we held at the end of the year, every year, where we flew in experienced mentors from overseas to give conference presentations in real life to the coaches around Australia. So a lot of the ones from the Outback and in Sydney and a few other places as well would come in to see these presentations being done by coaches from teams in Taiwan, the Hawaiian kids in Hawaii, Citrus Circuits as well. And that was always a really, really exciting event. And then when COVID happened, we transitioned into that to something called the 24 Hours of STEM, which was an online version. We also have something called the Koala Foundation, which is just a charity that we put together after one of the teams in Australia was completely flooded out of their workshop, and the Koala Foundation sells things like T-shirts and mugs with, funny robotics themed cartoons and Australian themed drawings. And the money that we raise from that, we then put towards assisting teams that may need some assistance after some kind of disaster has happened in their area and they've lost access to equipment or something like that. So that's the Koala Foundation. That's not all of our programs, but those are the ones that looking back, we think have been really impactful. Okay, so the last little bit of time that I've got here, I wanted to talk about some Chairman's Award tips. So some things that we think are worth thinking about when you're putting together your Chairman's Award submission based on everything you've done in your outreach program. So number one, first tip is to always start early. Obviously, you need to start training your Chairman's presenters when they're about 6 years old, as you can see in this picture over here. Jay would be very unhappy that I posted this picture, but funnily enough, she did become one of our Chairman's presenters. But as a much younger child, she was dressed up as a kangaroo and was our team mascot. But really do start early. Build season is always the most chaotic time of year for FRC teams, and you really want to be thinking about preparing for your Chairman's Award submission even as early as October the year before, if not earlier, and try and get a lot of the groundwork out of the way. Number two, think about using the resources that are available. So the Hall of Fame teams do a chairman's chat every year at championships. And then last year's one was obviously online, and so that was recorded. And in the chairman's chat, which is available on the First Inspires website as part of the chairman's resource, they go through all of the new questions. So the Chairman's Award questions were updated a couple of years ago. They go through what the changes mean, what is required for each of those questions, and answer some really common questions that come in from teams about what they should be doing in each aspect of the Chairman's Award submission. So if you haven't gone and watched the Chairman's Chat, I really, really recommend doing that, reading the documentation that comes along with that, and of course, making sure that you understand the definitions that are used in the Chairman's Award submission. So before you start writing your submission, make sure that you've gone and you've looked at all of those resources and that you really understand what the submission is asking you to do. Number three, and this kind of goes hand in hand with start early, is make sure you are collecting evidence of all of the outreach activities that you're doing, particularly the numbers. So if you're going to be talking about the number of people that were involved in particular events or saw you demo at particular outreach activities, make sure you're collecting the evidence on an ongoing basis. And this is also true for tracking the number of outreach hours that your students and mentors put in. Do this on an ongoing basis throughout the year, because it's always frustrating to get to writing your submission and having to put in, students volunteered XXX hours over the past year because you haven't got that number together yet. So make sure you are tracking the information over the course of the year. Another thing to do before you really get into writing your submission for the season is to make sure that you've thought back and you've reflected on past submissions and the feedback that you've gotten and the successes that you've had, because you don't want to be making the same, not mistakes, but, doing the same things year after year if they're proving to not be successful. So make sure that you sit down at the end of every season and put together your thoughts on how that's gone. And then when you start writing your submission for the next year, look back at that and talk about what you thought went well, the things that you wanted to change, and make sure that those are integrated as you start to prepare the submission. And then number 5, and this kind of goes along with what I was saying about using the resources, understanding what is required from the submission. Make sure that as you start to write it, that you're really focusing on the present and the past year and couple of years of outreach efforts, because that's what they're looking for in these submissions, is what you are currently doing and what you have done in the past couple of years, not across your entire team history. I know when we last submitted the Chairman's Award, it was a 5-year window, and it's substantially reduced now. It's only the past couple of years. So as you're discussing the programs that you want to focus on, make sure that you're focusing on the ones that are current. Okay, a couple more things that we think that can help you is make sure that everyone is on board. I think, and we certainly have been guilty of this, there's a tendency that your chairman's team is locked away in a different room to everyone else, frantically writing out the essay and answering the questions and super busy. And there can be a bit of a separation between the chairman's team and the other sub-teams within your organization. And we think it's really important that everyone is, if not directly involved in writing the essay, then certainly aware of what's going on, having some kind of input, and being involved in that whole process. Because, you know, in the end, when you're at the event and the judges are coming around asking questions, you want to make sure that everyone on your team can talk about your outreach efforts. And of course, outreach is something that involves everyone on the team. So everyone should be taking part in these initiatives. And so even if they don't know exactly how the initiative was just, was included in your submission, they certainly know that it's happened and they're able to talk about it, and maybe they even attended it. So make sure everyone is on board and involved in your chairman's submission. You want to make sure that your submission is unique and that communicates your team identity as well. So what makes your team stand out from others? Can you do something different in your presentation, in your video, that really makes your team stand out and makes your team memorable? Because you really do want to stick in the minds of the judges. I've done a lot of first Lego League judging, and I know certainly it's hard to keep track of all the teams that you've seen throughout the day, and it's the ones that have something really unique and interesting about them are the ones that you remember. So how can you make sure that you're remembered by the judges? Along with that, be creative in your presentation, in your video, in your essay. One way of doing this is by having some kind of theme that carries across all of the different elements of the submission. So that might just simply be calling back to your team's mission statement over and over again. And certainly in one of our essays, we would keep referencing the idea of everyone, everywhere. And we use that to tie together our whole essay. We also use the hashtag #MakeYourJourneyCount, and that's something that appeared across a lot of our social media that year, as well as in our chairman's video. So does your team identity lean itself towards particular themes that you can use to make everything into a really cohesive package? Okay, nearly at the end. So number 9, make sure you rehearse the presentation a lot. Now, I know everyone does this, you rehearse it until you've memorized the whole thing, but what can be really helpful is rehearsing it in front of lots of different people, because at the end of the day, you're going to present this to a group of chairman's judges that you've never met before. And so something that can be really helpful is having your team present to people that they're not super familiar with. So this might be parents of other students on the team that they don't know very well. It could be mentors from a different team in your area. It could be maybe someone at a sponsor company would really like to know what you guys are up to, so you deliver your chairman's presentation to them. Rehearse a lot in a lot of different situations and get people to ask you questions as well, because you never know what you're going to get asked during these interviews, and getting questions from lots of different people can help you prepare for that part of the interview. And then the last one I really recommend is asking for help from experienced chairman's teams. So lots of the Hall of Fame teams are really happy to share their expertise, to review essays, to look at presentations, as well as, of course, teams that have experience in winning regional chairman's awards and district chairman's awards. So if you think you've done everything that you can and your presentation is well on its way and your essay is well on its way, think about getting in contact with a team with chairman's experience to see what they think and see if they have any suggestions for how you can improve what you've done. We're very happy to do that if you want to get in contact with us via social media, and I know that there are lots of other teams around the world that are happy to do that as well. So think about getting in touch with experienced teams and getting feedback to improve your presentation. All right, I think that brings me to the end. So thank you very much for listening to me through all of that. I've just put up one last little picture here from one of our robots in the Outback trips, where we had some EV3 or NXT robots with us, and one of the people we were visiting had a little rescue kangaroo, and as you can see, he was getting to know the robot there. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. Before we switch to the questions on the chat box, I would like to ask you a question. So a major point you made throughout the presentation was sustainability. And I know that you were a former student in Thunder Down Under, and now you're a mentor. So as a Hall of Fame team, having alumni and working as mentors, how is the process of getting new team members happening for your team? Do you have like interviews, or do you randomly just take them?
Are you talking about bringing new students on board or new mentors on board? New students. Yeah, so we are a community team and we like to be open to everyone. So the way that we recruit new people is often just through word of mouth. So people will bring along friends and siblings, and we advertise on social media. We don't have any entry requirements because, you know, our whole mission here is to provide STEM to everyone. So we want anyone who wants to be a part of Team 3132 is able to be a part. We charge a very, very low entry fee every year, and we accept students from any school, homeschooled organisations. If you're in Sydney and you want to be a part of the team, then we are somewhere that you can come to.
That's great to hear. Is it the same for mentors? Do you specifically take your mentors from alumni or randomly?
Well, again, it's just whoever's interested, really. So we have a lot of alumni mentors. In fact, probably more than half of our mentors are 3132 alumni or alumni from other FRC teams. We've had a few people come from teams that were based at schools that don't take alumni mentors, and so they've mentored with us. And we've also taken university students who've come from the United States on scholarship to our university and who mentor. So we have a lot of university alumni mentors, which is really, I think, really helpful in some ways because they have so much experience with the FIRST program and how things are done in FRC and the types of parts that we use and the schedules that we work to. And so we found it really helpful to have alumni mentors. And then a lot of the other sort of industry mentors are coming from sponsor companies. So we've had a number of mentors coming from Google, who are one of our main sponsors, and other organizations that we've been associated with, like the CSIRO, which is a government science organization, and then parents as well. Parents are really important. So some of the parents are like, you know, full-time committed mentors. Sorry, I'm laughing a little bit because my dad is one of our mentors. He started mentoring when I was a student, and he still hasn't left 13 years later. So we have parent mentors who are there with us like throughout the build season, and then we also have parents come in and help us in other ways by, you know, organizing apparel and travel and things like that. So we get lots of different mentors from different places, and I think having that really diverse group is really helpful because you get a lot of different perspectives of first experience, industry experience, and all sorts of things.
We also say it too. We are not a team, we are a family.
Yes.
So
yeah, my sister is also on the team.
There are some questions in the chat box. One of them says, you talked about building sponsorships. How do you get in contact with them?
So we find that in Australia, it's hard to cold call sponsors, at least if you live in a big city. I think it depends a little bit on the context. I know that the teams we have in remote and outback towns are able to just like, you know, they know everyone because it's a small town. And so if you're in a small town or a really close-knit community, you're just, you know, walking into the shop where you know the shopkeeper and asking, do you want to donate some money to us? But in a big city, companies don't tend to like being cold called or approached like that. So we usually go through people that have some kind of connection. So if parents have contacts or work for particular companies that offer sponsorship programs to, you know, the children of employees, we've done that quite a lot. So we've applied for sponsorship money from organizations that provide that to children of employees. And then we've also just used contacts that people have. It's really useful that we're based at a university because that means we can contact people in industry and reach out to companies like Rockwell Automation and Google through university contacts. So I do think that you tend to have a little bit more success if you talk to people that you have a connection with.
That's great. And we have another question here. Someone asked, how is the first 2 weeks of the season going?
It's going pretty well. We have 2 teams running this year. We've started up our training team. So the training team is building a kit robot. There was a slight struggle where we found possibly an assembly issue with one of the gearboxes that took us about 6 hours to resolve, but we're through that, and they're currently prototyping ground intakes and terminal intakes and a climbing system that's pneumatic. So that's really exciting. Lots of wood. All of our prototypes are made out of wood. And then our 3132 primary team is CADing different robot subsystems. We were testing our second version of the shooter today. So we've tried out a hooded flywheel, and now we're trying a bit of a variation on that. So it's going pretty well. I hope everyone else's is going well as well.
There's a question that I was really expecting to get. How does it feel to be a Hall of Fame team?
Oh, well, it was pretty exciting. A few years ago now that we won, it was really exciting. We were in Houston and there was a fireworks show afterwards. So we were just standing in the middle of the field watching all of the fireworks. No, it's a really cool experience. We put a lot of work into the outreach programs, and we were really pleased to be chosen that year. And it's opened up a lot of opportunities for us to be able to work with other teams across the world and present at different conferences like this one. So it's been a really wonderful experience, and we always encourage people to get involved in the outreach side of FRC because it is really cool and you get to talk to so many different people. I think if we just focused on the robot, we wouldn't know all of the teams that we know now. So yeah, we really love the outreach side, and it's been really, really cool being part of the Hall of Fame.
Your father must have been proud.
I hope so.
So there's another question. They asked that call center is a good project. How did you guys make it sustainable?
So the call center is sustainable because it is a partnership with so many different people. To be able to run something like the call center, so it was initially 24/7. This year we've cut that back a little bit to operate at popular times because we were finding there were some dead zones where no one was calling in because everyone was asleep. But it involves a huge number of teams, so we can have potentially a dozen or more different teams involved. So we talk to, initially when we were setting it up, we were talking to teams that we knew really well. We had people like the Cheesy Poofs and Citrus Circuits on board, so teams that we were familiar with. And then over the years, we've tried to bring more people on board. It's really important to us that we have teams from around the world involved so that we can actually do all of the different time zones. And so people in different countries have been really great about getting involved. And we also try and bring in new teams every year. So this year we've brought on a new team from Mexico, Kerbotics, who's staffing one of the time slots, which is really cool. So it's just about, really using the connections that you have, getting lots of different people involved and making sure that you're constantly bringing new people on board so that as other teams, get busy with their own projects or can't commit, you've got other people ready to step up.
Yes. I think that was the last question. Thank you so much for the awesome presentation.
We appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me on tonight. I've really enjoyed it, and best of luck to all of you with build season. We hope to see you at an event sometime.
For you too. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks very much.
Bye.